I've been looking forward to come here for many reasons. Your weather is much nicer than ours. I also quite like Irish people, and no matter where on the island they're from. I'm an expert in what I'm going to speak about, and this is because an expert is a person who has made all possible mistakes within a narrow field. So I'll tell you about a few mistakes also, but most of them are not mistakes. Because Lego is my backdrop or the examples, I think you will be better off if I just give you a very quick introduction to the company's history, and there's a lot of product development in that as well. It's founded in the 30s. It was an unemployed, or not unemployed, he already had his own business. He was a carpenter, Kirk Christiansen. He had a little carpenter shop in a small town in the Billund, is in the middle of western Jutland. As we used to say, this is not the end of the world, but you can certainly see it from here. And you can see the photos. And in 1932, he had no more orders in his books. The unemployment rate that year in Denmark was 32%. It was pretty high unemployment rate all over Europe, and actually all over the world. We had what we call the world economic crisis. So rather than going to the public to get money, he couldn't do that. He started making wooden toys because he had a few machines, so they could treat some wood, and so he started making wooden toys. And after a while, it started growing, a little nice business, just a few people, but he earned a reputation for making very good, high-quality toys. Just after World War II, or during World War II, plastic was invented. It was invented by the British. And it came into industry after World War II. So it also came to this toy maker who then said, well, now we have wood and also plastic. There wasn't any idea in it other than quality and children. That was the only two ideas. It's got to be quality, it's for children, so it's toys. And later on, it developed and developed, and I was involved very much in creating what we call the intelligent brick, which came on the market in '97. Something which is important to understand is this something about the roots of the corporate culture. This was a sign that was and still is on the right side of the entrance to the head office. Says pray and work. That was the attitude. Very, very hardworking, down-to-earth people. And this sign, which is in Danish, says only the best is good enough. They were completely obsessed with quality and still are. The idea in quality was not from the point of view of perfection. It was more from the point of view that if you're giving something to children, it's got to be good. It's unethical to give children something that is not good. Here are just a few timelines. Here's, again, the story about the no orders, the plastic. Interestingly, because it was and is a very inventive family, so they kept experimenting with this plastic stuff, also so much that they used all their money for it. So in the early 50s, they had no more money. The bank had said no. They had one car they had to sell. And then they borrowed the neighbor's car. By the way, it was a baker. And they borrowed the baker's car. And so Senior had an extra time just for Christmas to visit customers once again to get a few more orders. In the spring after Christmas, they were still very hard. Life was hard for them, so actually they had 2 molds. That was the only assets they had, so to speak, that they could do something with. So they started a licensed production in Sweden because they could use the 1 mold for that. It has nothing to do with strategy or anything. It was simply survival. Then a very interesting thing happens in '58. They create a patent. There were other binding bricks than Legos. There were also English binding bricks. They looked the same. But Lego developed a pattern in the late 50s whereby tubes were inside the bricks so they would stick much better together. And that also cost a lot of money, by the way. And an important thing is a fire that happened in 1961. There were 2 plants then, small, very small, modest plants, one for wood and one for plastic. And the wooden factory burnt down. And that represented half of the range, maybe actually more than half of the range. And they decided not to rebuild it again. and they actually at the same time took away all the other plastic toys. So right after 61, the decision was we only stick with the brick. We take everything else out of the range, only the brick. And that was half of their turnover and slightly more than half of the range they simply just took out. Very, very shocking event for the salesman, but very powerful decision. And I hope for those of you who run small or medium-sized enterprises, it can maybe be an inspiration for once in a while to really focus and say, are we working with things that don't really have a lasting idea in them? Then get rid of it. I've structured my presentation like this. I will speak first about the core idea. Something that is very important for the way Lego works and did work was that you could think of 3 ways to attack the customer. You could think of being the masters of creating the demand, making children want Lego. So you could think of very advanced, very heavily loaded advertising, which of course convinces children. They don't have the adult judgment to sort of keep it away. You could also think of being the master, working with the trade, being the retailer's friend, being there all the time, messing up or making the shelves look nice, special discounts and what have you. Or you could think of the child and say, if whatever we make, it's got to work here. It's got to work in the hands of a child. Lego's focus was and is very much here. I wouldn't say that they do this bad. I would more say this and this they do averagely well. This, here they're champions. And this may also inspire those of you who have a company, because at least if you are working with consumer products, but even with business-to-business products, you have these issues. And if you can choose among these 3, this is always the most important, because that's where the repeat business is. That's where they will come back. The most stupid thing to do was really to say, I'll spend a lot on advertising, I'll be a very charming, aggressive friend with the retailers, and then I will bring a crap product to market. That end doesn't work. A lot of research has been made over years with business schools, universities. Can advertising lift a lousy product? And the answer is no. It can lift it short term, but not long term, and the equation doesn't hold. Whereas if you make the right product, sooner or later this will work for you. Here's a funny, maybe a hopeless way to explain why it is such a success. It is a customer-company competition triangle, and the whole idea is, as you probably know, is if you have an idea, check that it is right with the customer, is it right with you, and is it right with the competition in the sense that we're doing something that the competition can't match. Why it's so good with customers? 4 reasons. 1, it works in the hands of children. They play longer with a Lego set than most other toys. I sometimes asked by journalists, isn't Lego the world's best toy? Then I say, no, that is the ball. That is the most genius thing. And then Lego is number 2. No, it's not number 2. Number 2 is water. And number 3 is Lego. It appeals. It educates. Children don't speak about that, but parents speak a lot about it. And then there is this sense of collectivity that you can add to it. It's something that is in mankind that we like to collect. So Lego offers that also. How about looking at it from a company point of view? This modularity that is in Lego, it provides standardization. Factory people love this. Repetition. You can reuse components. And what does the collectivity do? It creates repeat buyers. So when you market, whenever Lego markets a new product, it's to completely new people. There's a lot of collectors already out there that are waiting for it. Maybe if you're a good marketing company in a particular country, you will have name and address of many of them already. Very powerful. How about competition? Apparently, this may have changed, but in the 50s and 60s and 70s, where this really took off, the competition was weak on this. They were very good at advertising. I just met a man who had worked with Mattel. Mattel made much more advertising than we did. They spent, measured in % of turnover, double as much as we did. Some were very aggressive with the retailers, but there's a lot of competitors who didn't get their products right. Particularly the clutch power with bricks is very important. It's quite unsexy, but it's so important to be sure it fits children's hands exactly. And Lego was the first in the toy industry who was able to really precision mold plastic to the level needed. How they did that is quite interesting, because it was very hard then to find Danes who could do that well. So they found out that the Swiss were the best to do that. So the second generation man, he probably, I don't know whether at that time he'd borrowed the baker's car, but he went to Switzerland and found a plastic engineer and got him up to Denmark. And he lived there for 20 years and got married with a Danish woman, but he never forgot Switzerland. So as soon as he retired, he went back to Switzerland. Here's just a few photos. You can see this principle of modularity. Even in the butt of a figure, there are 4 holes. Here you can see the famous studs that were patented. This incidentally from a Duplo brick, but this stud and tube principle, the tube principle here, got patented in '58. Very important for them. Here's just a few examples on how they improved the core. Some ideas that further enhanced Lego's chance to be a successful business. One is they expanded the product. Originally, when people bought Lego, they would say, I would like a bunch of green bricks or yellow bricks, maybe a basic set where there would be some green, red, blue, some doors, some windows, some wheels, and that's it. And build what you want. That is the core, beautiful idea, which Lego has never abandoned. It's always there. You can always get that. It's always a huge range. Many people say it's not there, but it is there. It's always there. But they added themes. That you could think of a space rocket and you can fire station, police station, pirate ships and what have you. They added themes. That added enormously to Lego sales, enormously. It's another dimension. It doesn't take the creativity away. It just adds a new dimension, not only for the user, also for the gift giver. It's a little bit more easy to be a gift giver and say, I gave him a rocket ship, instead of saying, I gave him a bunch of bricks. He actually already had a bunch of bricks. That helps a lot. Play figures were also added, and this is an interesting thing which may also inspire some of you here. It's very important when you look at users to think of the type of use. Use is just not use. The more you can detail when you study the use of your product, what is it actually that is happening? And one process is to build a house or a car. It's a little bit like being the small engineer. As soon as we added figures, little people, we added to the play, we got more into what we call role play, where children imagine they are something. I'm this person and you're that person, and now we meet and talk and fight and whatever they do. That role play dimension is also a need children have. And the Lego people help with that dimension. We also added a price point ladder in every theme, so when there was a theme, say pirates or space, there would not just be one set at some kind of average price. There would be a ladder, so you would be sure you can enter this theme for, say, £1.50 or €2 or something like that, and then you can add to it, and the most expensive thing would be like a Christmas gift for 100 or 200 euros or something like that. How do we, I'll talk later about how we found out about this with these price points. Then we would launch in waves. That is, so you do not launch everything in one go. Then you don't, because retailers are so that whenever you launch something, you will get their attention for a couple of days, but then they sort of fall asleep again. But if you could sort of put it out, so say we have a launch for January, we have one for Easter, and we have one for back to school, and then one for pre-Christmas or something like that. That would be a smarter idea. We try it all the time, and they still do, to widen age and gender appeal. I've been involved in a lot of girl launches, and now Lego has one again that seems to be quite good. And this is, of course, also, you can imagine a child sitting on Christmas Eve opening a box of Lego, and there are missing parts. That would be terrible. So Lego did a lot for that. Those are things that all have a part in building Lego, and should I stop my presentation here, which I don't, I would say that the product is by far the most important thing in Lego success. Behind that, of course, is people. So you could say people are the most important thing in Lego success. This is just a little joke for you before you fall asleep, but I have a message in it that, you know, British Airways opened a line from Tokyo via Paris to London some years ago, and they had big billboards at Cromwell Road down with Heathrow and elsewhere saying, breakfast in Tokyo, lunch in Paris, dinner in London, and then someone had written, and luggage in New York. And the reason why we laugh at this is because we know this is something we hate. That's why we sometimes hate this industry. They don't take care of us in the way they should. That goes for airports as well. They don't take care about our comfort. Have you ever been interviewed in an airport? They always ask, how much have you shopped today? How much do you think you will shop? How much did you spend last time? Have you seen our offerings? They look at you as a person and not as a human being. I think it is stupid and it's unethical. They should ask about three things. It is about safety, comfort, and speed. Those are the three things we need in an airport. Safety, comfort, and speed. If you've been to Amsterdam, you see that's not their slogan. They see, buy, fly. And a quite interesting thing, closely linked to product development, is how you define your customer. When I was very young and went to the biggest toy fair in the world, which is in Nuremberg in Germany, we could meet business people say, yes, there are kids and there are teens. That was their simple definition of a customer. Sometimes I could even meet salesmen from other companies who looked at the customer as a retailer. And we always said the retailer is just an intermediary. It's just a sales channel. We should, of course, respect him, but it's much more important to look at the end user. So that has always been Lego's viewpoint. If you have a Lego company here, a distributor or its own sales company, a retailer, and an end user, Lego would always say, this is number one. This is number one. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't have value propositions to these. You must always, that is another rule, also, no matter how small your company is, you must have a value proposition for every piece in the value chain that is between you and the end user. You must be able to answer the following question: why should that next company in the chain or next person in the chain buy your product? You must have an answer to that. And you realize it's not enough to say that's because I'm such a nice chap. Or you will realize it's not enough to say, well, I have such a smart logo. Or I have a very interesting brand statement. Those things really don't hold when you come to the moment of truth. You've got to have benefits, not features, benefits. How does it add value to the next person or company in the value chain? So if you take a retailer, for instance, of course they're happy that the product doesn't have a lot of complaints, but retailers don't care about product. They care about what it does to their business. They want the margin. Not in percentages, but in absolute terms, although they always speak about percentages. That's because they can't calculate. But the real thing is absolute margin divided by what they put behind it. They either put investment behind it, working capital, they put people behind it, and they put shelf space behind it. There's a lot of gardeners, people who make roses, for instance, on the island where I live. They do it in greenhouses. The weather is not good enough for other things. So they export all over Europe. So I know something what happens. If you take little roses that you see in supermarkets, approximately 50% of those roses don't survive the treatment by the retailers because they won't put people behind it. So the trick, if you design roses, how can you make roses that take care of themselves? So that is a great development idea right now. How can you put water containers in them and things like that? Because the retailers don't do anything. That's a very basic rule. Never expect a retailer to do anything for you. You must invent something that works on its own. Here's another, I spoke about age and gender. So Lego worked with a very detailed age and gender. This, you can imagine, this will of course blow up your range. Why don't we want big ranges? Because they cost a fortune in working capital. It's sort of whenever it's like having more children, it's of course nice, but it all costs. There's the same with ranges. If the ranges get too big, you just add cost. Maybe you don't add enough value. But so it's a mixture here. But if you have enough demand, if you're good enough, maybe you can be more detailed. And that sometimes it has helped Lego enormously. Not just as a silly marketing gimmick. The whole thing is that the motoric skills, the mental skills of children differs enormously from this age to this age to this age. There's greater difference between that age and that age than there is between an adult aged 40 and an adult aged 60. It's a thing I'm getting more and more happy about, by the way. Maybe a little bit philosophical, but it means a lot in product development to Lego. We make toys for children, but they should always be of such a nature that the parents will endorse them. That's why Lego won't make war toys. A little bit about analytical tradition. Lego has developed over the years a very solid habit for researching its products. Very solid, very thorough. And just to help you, that you shouldn't believe this is probably highly advanced. The whole trick is it isn't. It's, of course, to know how easy you can do it, how fast you can do it, and still get it done. Here are just a few examples. You'll imagine it's very important that Lego can offer appealing themes and models. No doubt about that. How do you find out whether a theme or a model is appealing? And the answer is, shoot a photo of it. And of course, you will say to this designer, try to develop various models, various themes. Try to do that. Shoot photos of it, or make digital mock-up photos. You can do that now. Then, after 28 interviews in Hamburg, in a particular suburb in Hamburg, you have talked to the world. The world has spoken. The result that comes out of 28 interviews in the right place in Hamburg doesn't change even if you add New York and London and Berlin to your research. You don't, of course the results differ, but not so much that you will change your conclusion. You're always looking for a clear winner. That's the only one you launch. You don't launch everything. You're looking for the clear winner, and the clear winner is visible after 28 interviews. If that's not the case, maybe we haven't been good enough. That's another thing. If you take price points, how do you research price points? It's very simple. You ask the retailer for the cash register. Can we allow us to see some of the printouts from your cash registers? Then we can simply study what are the price points people buy at. And we can also ask retailers. I mean, even if we don't think they're the nicest people on earth, we can at least ask them and hear how they think about price points. And a classic thing in toys is, what is the price point for Christmas? It depends on whether it's the parent's gift or Aunt something's gift, or whether it's for birthday and what have you. But that's very important. I also consult, and sometimes I work with people who are in the gift-giving business. For instance, the flower people. I say to you, are you aware that your product is a gift? No, we never thought about that. Have you tried to buy a gift? There's a very funny situation when people buy a gift. They will come to a store and say, I quite like that vase. What is the price of that? Well, that is 50 euro. Then I say, I'm sorry, that's too cheap. We want to offer something for 80 euros. So prices can be too low if you're in the gift market. You got to hit those price points right. Sometimes you do it by simply increasing the price, which is very interesting. How do we ensure that they understand packaging? There are two things in packaging. They should understand it and they should like it. Of course, there's a lot of engineer stuff. How do we ensure that they understand packaging? Because packaging stands there on the shelf completely alone. The idea is that we will now explain to the customer. Who should explain? The retailer. They don't explain anything. Should you? You can't be in all the stores. So it's very important that packaging or layouts like the ones you see on the little exhibits there, they speak for themselves. No help. How do you test that? It's very simple. You simply show the target audience your packaging, take it away after 30 seconds or something like that. And then you interview them. What did you see? Please explain me. Then you can also let them study it longer and once again ask. The problem is with entrepreneurs, they are so in love with their product, they start explaining it. If the consumer says, I can't understand it, let me tell you. Shut up. You can't be in all the boxes. If the packaging cannot tell the story in its own way, there's something wrong. We were in Belfast yesterday. I saw 2 great products, both with lousy explanations, both in their facings and in their packaging, completely hopeless. And that will stop their business if they don't change it. How do we ensure that people like packaging? There's a mistake many companies do. They design the packaging and show it to the consumers. Say, do you like it? That is wrong. Why is it wrong? They're not buying the packaging. They're buying what is in it. So the role of the packaging is not to be liked. The role of the packaging is that the product inside should be liked. So rule 1 when you work with packaging design test is ask to the product, not the packaging. Another thing is do it with controlled experiments. So you put it into another bunch of products and simply ask which product would you prefer, blah, blah, blah. Don't say that you have changed the packaging. It's a little controlled experiment. You can do that also if you want to change the etiquette of a beer. You take the same beer in another bottle, the one you want to redesign, and you have the redesign there. And then you ask, here are 2 different beers, which do you like the most? No missing parts is important. That is a quality system thing. There are a few tricks you do that. One of them is you have very precise scales. We would call it weight. That is maybe, so you measure the weight of the box. If it's under something, you say maybe something is wrong. It'll be pushed out. The other thing you do, think of a box with 1,000 components in. You compartmentize it. So you say there is 100, 100, 100, 100, 100. So you research each of these hundreds before you put it all together. That's also a way to do it. Easy instruction. How does Lego test its instruction? 1 school class is enough. You do a little extra test once in a while to be sure. It cannot be in the same school class all the time. Then they get too good at build. They become experts. But 1 school class is enough, and teachers tend to like that. So you come with your sets. They are just in plastic bags, and then you have your instructions. And then the school class starts and builds, and 1 person from Lego walks around and see how you have problems here. What was the problem? Oh, write down. You have problems here. What was the problem? Write down. And after an hour or so, you know where the instruction has issues, and then you go back to the design and say, change this and change this. If you're in doubt, you test again. So what am I trying to say? Look at all this. There's none of these. This is, of course, an issue, but all the others are very low-cost tests. But you know what? Many toy people don't use this. They believe in their own ideas, which is scary. But this was basically some of the profound and important ways Lego has done over years and still do. Now about business innovation. Well, I'll speak about that because it has meant a lot to Lego the last 20 or 30 years. Lego had 2 problems during the 90s. Probably many more problems, but these were certainly very profound. One is that the access to the consumer is, of course, very important for a company like Lego. The ordinary toy retailer died or disappeared. There are not many left. They became toy supermarkets. And in the toy supermarkets, the most dominant one was and is Toys R Us. And Toys R Us's idea was, we'll sell anything and we won't explain anything. That's their idea. We respect that. There are box shifters, as we say. Go to Toys R Us, buy, but don't ask anything. They won't answer because they can't. Another issue was advertising. Lego also needed advertising, not as much as Mattel and Hasbro, but they needed advertising. And the cost of media increased. You couldn't basically structure a campaign that worked unless it cost a fortune. So those 2 things were very, very severe for Lego. And then we had hypermarkets and supermarkets. Of course, they would be happy to list Lego's products in their range, but only for Christmas. out of season, you could just be 5 little boxes next to the margarine or whatever. That's not interesting. So Lego saw that as a huge challenge. How do we ensure that we can have access? And this was at a time where in universities, we also, in my department, we worked with the internet very early on, before it was even called internet. We worked with some universities in England where we were on the net together. It just had another name then. But ordinary consumers were not on the internet early 90s. Two other things happened. The PC got really into the toy market, particularly into the toy room. So the middle class income family, which was Lego's core and up, I mean, even very poor people luckily have Lego, but they couldn't buy as much. But those who bought a lot were probably middle income and up, and they would also afford a computer. So there were some years where they would just buy computer and software and not Lego bricks. However much they loved Lego, they would still say, now we need a computer. That was a new thing. We also had the Nintendo games that came in. They're still there, but in those years, they were just the new thing. And then we had the movie characters, the video. Children got video in their rooms. Heaven forbid, but that happened. So they weren't out playing anymore. They just sat there and looked, which is scary. But what they looked at was not educational stuff. It was movie characters. So that was the new heroes in the toy room, was movie characters and software characters. So that meant that during, particularly in the end of the 90s, the Lego sales started plateauing. Lego's only plateaued back for a while. So we had to do something. And what we did is, ideas here, I just think these are all launched. Some of them were already there, but we just gave it an extra go. Education is another channel. I mean, you can think of children as someone being at home, wanting toys for Christmas and for birthday. But you can also think of children as being in school. And I say that as an input to those of you who run a little company. You can also think about your customers as in the point of view, where are they? Where are they when they use my product? Are they only there? Well, maybe they're also there. And maybe that creates another need. And when children are at school, the need is different because a teacher cannot buy a set of Lego and go to the headmaster and say, well, we're progressing with math in my class. We are playing with Lego all day. That's not good news. But actually, Lego can be a fantastic toy in math education, provided you just help the teacher a bit. So to be in the educational market, you need to have teacher guides. You need to test on classes, on teachers. Will this work faster than other methods? And if it works faster, it always works more happy, that is for sure. But if it works faster, then they quite tend to like it. And Lego has quite a few ideas that work faster and better and more engaging in the classroom than many others. Think of how learning rich a little robot is for children. How many dimensions of learning there is in this. Very, very powerful stuff. It's another sales channel. It's actually a very boring sales channel, by the way, but it's another sales channel. So it's other people who visit schools. Very difficult. But if you can sort of crack the nut, and Lego has cracked the nut, I was the first to do it. It wasn't very beautiful in the beginning. We made a lot of mistakes. We used our own people in Lego sales teams. We would allow, if you went to Britain, then they would have like 25 Lego sales reps. Could one of them also be the educational sales rep? What is wrong with that focus? That one guy still belongs to the other culture, and the culture of being a rep that visits retailers is completely different from someone that works with the educational distributor. It's a completely different world. But we changed that over the years, but I was the first to make that mistake. Theme parks. Why on earth could we do theme park? The simple reason was we already had one. We just didn't call it a theme park. It was more a show park in Denmark, and it was very popular. And only by a mistake had we once started taking an entry fee. So we also knew people were willing to pay. Then we tweaked it a little bit more until it started being very profitable. And then we said, now we can knock it off and launch that in other countries. Is that risky? Yes. A a theme park costs close to 200 million euros. And from the day you start building, you can't stop. Who will buy a half theme park? So you have this very interesting, we're making theme parks that there is a year and a half where you are past the point of no return. Very exciting stuff. We managed to make three, and three more have been built after I have left, so there are 6 now. And they do enormous good for the brand because it institutionalizes the brand. From another perspective, is this the same as Lego? Yes, it is. It is the same story. It is the same brand. It is caring for children. It's caring for children's creativity. It is using the same signals. It's a very colorful thing. It's family. I talked to you about before this, that Lego is cohesive, family child. Is this family child? Yes, very much so. So it's a very, very powerful thing. The biggest challenge is here, it's after all a different industry, and it is a huge upfront investment. Could Lego manage a huge upfront investment? Yes, we had equity like hell. We didn't ask any banks to do this. They got into other problems later on, but I won't talk about that. But so what I'm trying to get across also with new ideas is if you already have a successful product, if you do something new, be sure it's not completely new. Then you're in danger land. There has to be in quite many aspects where you say this is basically the same. It's not all new. There has to be something that is also the same. Here we have the work with the movie characters. This basically means you go to Hollywood and visit Warner Brothers and others and get a world license for using the theme in construction toys exclusively. That is the trick. You cannot have other construction toys doing this, but you can't prevent the property owner also to license to Hasbro or others. But construction toys worldwide, that is Legos. That was the strategy, and that worked. I was part of developing it and very fond of it, and they still have great fun with it. The interesting thing from a design point of view is it complicated to design Star Wars with Lego? No, because the theme is given. A lot of doubt is taken away. So actually, when we did our first Star Wars launch, we only needed 7 new bricks. The rest was repetition. An interesting thing, when I just say that war, we don't like war, how can you have a logo or a brand that says Star Wars? But that we really researched and found out that Star Wars means adventure, it doesn't mean war. We also made software, and of course, again, if you take that step, can a toy maker who is loaded with plastic in his brain, can he suddenly be a software developer? And the answer is completely no. What you can be is you can brief software development shops to do it because you know your brand, you know it's got to be good to children, you know a lot about children's fantasy and creativity, and you know you want to create something in that arena. And then you start several small shops on and see who comes up with the best. Through little tests, you find out who comes up with the best. And then you take it from there. Does Lego then distribute it? No, it's a different distribution system. So it's basically an outbound licensing. Why would Lego do that? Because there's not so much margin on outbound licensing. And the answer again is you don't live on margins. There are other criteria. You should never just look at margin in its own right. It should always be divided by something. What is Lego's investment here? It's very low. There's a risk because you put your brand at risk. So that's why you do a lot of tests. This became the world's best-selling software in '97 and '98. We also went into robotics. Robotics basically mean the children do not only design structures, they also design behavior. Behavior means what should the robot do if? So if the light goes on, what should it do? Or if it bumps into something, what should it do? So you can put sensors on it, you can program this if-then behavior, and you can put action on it. And action very often is just an engine that starts running and does something. It can also be a whistle. It could be other things. That's what a robot is. Lego, and Lego in this case really means me. Already back in the 80s, I'd worked a lot with this for the school market. And there we had 100 wires going this way. We call it the spaghetti problem. But as soon as we had that solved, this is self-contained, it has its own batteries, and it's managed infrared. It was a whole new world that came to us. Very powerful stuff. We also made it so that children could share their inventions on the net, and that is still going. But this started in 97, 98, that they could share their inventions on the net. We always talked about this 8-year-old boy from Manchester speaking on the net with a technical professor from Munich or New York, this idea that children share their creativity on the net. And that is still a very, 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 very powerful thing. Here's just a few things that Lego has done over the years to take advantage of the internet. There's an e-shop. Lego did that ice cold right away. As soon as we opened Lego.com in 97, 98, we started selling our own toys on it. You can say, wouldn't the retailer get angry? But I always showed you, retailers are just an intermediate. We are the children's friend. And then we also knew they could not find out how much we sold. So honestly, whenever a retailer said, you're selling on the net, yeah, but you know, you don't carry the full range. People need to see the full range. And there has to be a spare part program. And by the way, it's small business. The truth is, it's not that small. It got bigger over the years. But the idea has always been, it should never take anything away from the retailer. So if you work with a retailer, you've got to be damn sure that he is also better off each year. That is a professional task you have with retailers. But he has to do something for it. Create and share visually, I already talked about that. Design your own Lego set is also something that happens. It's not something that Lego pursues very heavily, and I know they're probably discontinuing this. I don't do it so much anymore because it has a lot of other problems in it. Spare parts is, of course, very important. Imagine you have a huge rocket ship and you're missing one part that the vacuum cleaner took. You can go to the net and buy the missing part. And then there's a community club. This is interesting. You know this concept of community brand. You know Harley Davidson. Who is the most speaking, most communicating body about Harley Davidson? Is that Harley Davidson's marketing manager and his marketing budget? No, it's the owners. And this is the same here. Who speaks most about Lego? Is it Lego? No, it's the owners, it's children. They speak. And there's something called Lego User Group Network, LogNet, where it's very, very huge, where they speak all kinds of Lego and ideas and what have you. And the trick is to support it, but don't intervene too much because that's their world. The last thing I'll talk about is people. Here's an important statement I'd like to make. If you want to do something really great, don't do it alone. And I know that some of you may represent one-person companies. If you want to do something big, be sure you have partners and friends and experts around you. The founder of Lego, in particular, his son, who's dead now, we're now, it's the third generation that owns Lego now, and he's the same age as I am. But the second generation, he was a true expert in getting people on board. I mean, the third generation also is, but there it had become more common, right? But the second generation, who started basically the brick and all this, he was a true expert in finding experts. For instance, this with precision molding, it's very typical. I mean, he only spoke Danish. He didn't speak a word English or German, or for that sake, Swiss. He went to Switzerland to find the right plastic molding engineer because he knew this is key. And when we started working with themes, the design people that he worked with then were the best in the country. That is also interesting to see. Again, when we started with research, he took the best person in the country to run research. That was very clever done. This is maybe not people, but still it's a process that guides people. Lego works with, and I always recommend anyone who works with product development to work with some kind of staged process, a structure. It can be something like this. This is basically Legos. We had an idea stage. That meant there is a page now about a product. It's just written, maybe a little photo or a little simple drawing. What is the idea? Who is it for? What would it cost? What is it about? How would it look? Blah, blah, blah. Where should it be sold? Just a little page. And then we could take it to concept development. So concept development means we're not developing it physically yet. We're not about molding or prototyping. We're just trying to understand the idea better, to create concepts around it. So it's conceptual. Maybe that would end up in 5 or 10 pages. Of course, if you're in a huge company, you have all these academics who write too much and say too little. But the essence may be just 5 pages of how powerful is the idea, which market does it fit to, how could we sell it, and also what some people would call a business case or a business plan. Maybe there would be more drawings now and more photos, but is it enough to make a judgment? Is it worth taking into real development? Because the interesting thing here is how big a share of the total cost have we spent here? It's basically nothing. But just this stage adds so much value to navigate after. Then comes product development, where you develop prototypes, you get much better grip on the aesthetics and the functionality and the economy. And of course here you, in a way, have reached the point of no return. But in case of Lego, we took the luxury to say we want more of this going because we know it cannot all end up right. But it's a nice luxury to have. And prototypes does not necessarily mean that they're production ready. It means that you just understand them better. There's something called fast tooling or fast prototyping. There are many ways to do it. Then, if it's still okay, then you can start what we would call launch preparation. Then you get into tooling and getting the molds ready, packaging, marketing, production. Now, here the money really starts. But it's a great discipline to have had all these steps to look at before you come here. How do you then judge all this? It's a very basic thing that you could also do. Probably many of you already do it. Take each and every idea, no matter whether it's here or here or here. Whenever it crosses a step, you recalculate it. You recalculate, so you have the idea described. If the idea is here now, it's still described on the same diagram, namely, how much value will it add to my business and my brand? You can just do it by a point score from 1 to 5. How good how good are we to execute this idea? And then you can look at the diagram, and of course the trick is to have many ideas up here, right? That add a lot of value to your business and brand, and that you are the right person or right company to execute. That is the basic idea. So you can monitor, do I have enough good ideas? And the risk we very often see with companies, they work with only one idea. I like the idea of focus, but you don't start with focus, you end with focus. You start with several ideas, and then you look at them, and then you see. Then you pick up the right thing. This is very, very important, and any size of business can do this. Another concept that I think is important is if you work with something that is new, then ask yourself, how new is it? It is new to you. That's enough, then that's new, of course. But it may not be new in the industry, right? It's just new to you. It may also be new to the industry, but it may not be new to the world. And most ideas that are around are not new to the world. They're only new to the category, maybe, or sometimes just new to the company. And the reason why I say that is if it's not new to the world, what does it imply? It implies the idea already exists somewhere. You can go and see it. The future has arrived. Go and see it. Starbucks coffee, was that new to the world? No, the idea of making good coffee in a cafe. Schultz, who developed Starbucks, he got that idea from Milan in Italy. But he brought it to a country with the deepest of respect, which then didn't know what good coffee was. It was all lousy. You could get lousy coffee with caffeine and lousy coffee without caffeine. So he brought the idea with a nice coffee and a nice cafe. And he has said it. You can read it on the internet. Schultz has said, I got the idea in Milan. Lego has never made anything that was new to the world. Only the tubes inside the bricks in 1958. Lego had a vision in the 80s, which basically said like this, and I say this, but you can, if you have a vision that is not a product yet, it's something you work with in your head. If you think one day this will be something great, an idea could be to work with a university about it. That was what we did. Already in the 80s, we went to a university and said, is there anyone out there who plays with toys and computers? And we found out there was a university in Boston, MIT, very famous, but there they played with computers and toys. They even played with our product. And in 1984, I stepped through the door over there. I just called them, said, I'm Christian Majgaard from Lego. I've heard you play with toys and computers. Can we come and visit you? Oh, yes, come in. And that was the start of a marriage made in heaven that hasn't ended. Lego is still heavily involved with MIT and vice versa. The first guy we worked with is Professor Seymour Papert, whose whole knowledge is about how children play and how children learn, epistemology. He has written a lot of books about it, and he was, other than being crazy about understanding how children learn, he was crazy about computers and toys. What a wonderful partner to have. So we worked with him for many years, and when he retired, the next guy jumped up. So there's a Lego chair at MIT. So there's a Lego professor at MIT. If you have a one-person company, you may not want to afford to have a Lego professor, but it's quite easy, I think, to work with universities or other educational institutions because they need material, they need some substance to play their theories against. They need you also. They cannot just sit and develop theories alone. They need someone to bounce ideas with. So quite often they quite regard it as a stimulating thing to have people in business they can work with. When you move from a core idea to a side idea, it's of course important that that side idea is not too far away, because then you're at huge risk. So there has to be a lot of things that are the same, but of course there are also things that are not the same. And here I'm just trying to show you that some of the new ideas we worked with, how were they not the same? R&D used to be internal in Lego, but when we work with software and other things and theme parks, we needed to work with alliances. Our designers were very nice and humble people. I mean, the other software designers were also nice, but in that first IT bubble years, they were playboys. They all had ponytails and had mysterious language, and their cars were always Porsches. Can you imagine to bring such fellows to Billund, where it says pray and work? It's a different culture, I'll tell you. Production. When you grow up in the middle of nowhere, you become a make culture. You don't normally just buy things, you make them. But here was Christian Majgaard saying, we don't make all these new things, we just buy them. We don't make a Hitachi chip, you buy a Hitachi chip, of course. Calculation, if you're a single product company, you tend to get very smart, fast calculation models. Legos was always, what is the production price multiplied by 10, and we have the end user price. This may sound completely wild, but remember, these are small things. Buttons, for instance, there you multiply by 1,000. So small things, you multiply by more. If it is a whole horse or a whole car, the figure is different. Here you had to have a new calculation model. Sales and marketing. The pride in Lego from a distribution point of view was our own sales companies. There were photos of them everywhere, and always with a flag. And for each country, there was a picture and a flag. It was like, oh, how strong we are. But here you had to work with others. What does it mean? Why do I say this? You may also have an idea that now breaks out with another idea. So it's a good idea to check where is it most different and what do I do about it? Because you can never just have the same people do new things. That is dangerous. You have to think about that. That's why I say it. So one idea is, if you're working with something that is different from an old core, try to make a little distance. These people cannot work in here, then they burn up. We use something, it's a metaphor I call the satellite. A satellite should have a certain distance to Earth. If it's too close, it gets drawn in and burns. If it's too far away, it just disappears. They have to manage this distance. What does it mean in practical terms? It may be they're in the same town, but not in the same building. Maybe they don't have the same way of reporting because they work in a different way. Maybe they have different budget procedures and so on. Whenever you move, no matter how small your company is, from an old core, the thing you used to do, to something new. I used to use a metaphor. If we were supposed to send a rocket to the moon here from Letterkenny, who should be on that project? And then there are quite a few who would say we should have a lot of people from Letterkenny. It's here it starts, isn't it? Yet I would say I would be damn sure I had a lot of people on the project who had worked with moon rockets before. That would be a damn good idea, wouldn't it? And it's the same for you also. If you have an idea that is sort of different now, you're doing different things. It doesn't work if you're a team of people who say, we used to do this and now we do that. You have to ask first, there must be someone on the team who has already done that new thing before, or else you don't get it right. You cannot just read theory about it. You have to add other people. If you're a small company, you can say, I can't afford another hire, then find a partner, find a consultant, find some of these people who are here and ask them, let them help you. Just be humble. Don't do this alone. And be sure there's enough of these who know about the new, that you have these. And that basically ends my presentation with a little, I'll show you a little movie to remind you how important it is to work with the people who know that the future has arrived.
Ist mein Sektor. Das hier ist das wichtigste Gerät des Küstenwächters. Das Gerät und das Gerät. Überlebensradar.
Mayday, Mayday. Hello, can you hear us? Can you hear us? Can you... Over. We are sinking. We are sinking.
Hello? This is the German Coast Guard.
We are sinking. We're sinking.
What are you thinking about?
And you can imagine how the interview went when he was originally hired. And I imagine that the older guys in the rescue station said, well, let's take him. He's one of ours. He's like us. And this is sometimes a deliberate agenda, but it's certainly always a hidden agenda as well, is when we hire people, we go for harmony. Let's get a copy of ourselves, maybe a milder copy. But that is dangerous if you're moving towards a new idea. You must hire people who know where this ends, who have been there before. That is very important. And it's a huge chance for developing a company. If you say, my company is so small, there can only be me and my wife and my dog, okay, then at least find consultants and partners who know about the place you're going to. That is important. Very, very important. So to end, a conclusion, what is the most important thing if you're developing a company or business is two things, people and the right idea. And if you have the right people, you also tend to get the right idea. So in that way, people become a little bit more important. What is a right idea? A right idea is an original idea which the customers like and the competitors can't quite make, and you are good at making. Thank you for your attention.